There are things in this world that defy explanation. Things that no matter how hard we try and explain, we simply can't. This story is based on true events during my time as a paranormal investigator. In 2009, I began receiving reports about encounters with these sinister, almost demonic-like entities. And what's strange about these cases is that they are eerily similar. They all occurred within the general same area. They all happened around the same time, and all the reports seem to coincide with one another. The first case that I received was from a man named Charles and his wife Sarah. They had been driving down a rural road outside of town one January. It was very cold that night. It was snowing, and basically the area they were at, there was no one around. So they left at 4 a.m. to go to work. And as they were driving down this road at 4 a.m., all of a sudden, their car completely stopped working. They managed to coast to the side of the road, and Charles knew a little bit about mechanics. So he decided to get out of his car, check the engine, and see what was going on. So he pops the hood of the car and he begins looking at the engine. When all of a sudden he got this ominous feeling. He said that his stomach felt like it just dropped, and something seemed very strange. He then looked to his right, where he seen 3 young individuals that looked to be aged 12 to 15 years old. And he said in front there was what seemed to be the leader, who was almost 14, 15 years old, and behind him were 2 smaller teenagers. And he didn't like this situation. So the boy in charge, the 14 or 15-year-old, he says to Charles, "Can you give us a ride?" And he said that he said it in almost a raspy, deep voice. And it didn't sound very human-like. And Charles says, "Hey, look, as you can see, I can't go anywhere. My car's broken down. I'm not going anywhere right now, so I can't give you a ride." And the boy in front proceeds to say, "Go to your car and start it." And he thinks, okay, this is crazy because obviously the car's not starting, but he doesn't want to be out there any longer. So he goes into his car and says, "You know what? I'll give it a try." So he turns the ignition. The car starts up. And all of a sudden, he's excited because now the car is running. But that excitement turns to dread when he looks out the driver's side window and sees that these 3 young people are standing next to his vehicle. So he rolls down the window, and once again, the oldest of the group says, "Now, can you give us a ride?" And he says, "Listen, I'm here with my wife. It's late. I don't feel comfortable giving you guys a ride, but I have my cell phone here. If you want, I can call someone for help. And, I can call anybody you want. I have my cell phone. But I'm not going to give you guys a ride. And they said, no, you don't understand. If you don't give us a ride, if you don't tell us to come in, we can't come in. And Charles thought that was really strange that they said that. And he said, look, I can't give you guys a ride. I don't feel comfortable with that. Now, if you want me to call someone, I will, but I'm not going to give you a ride. And a third time, this older boy in the group says to him, give us a ride now. And he says it more aggressively. And he said when he said that, he stepped forward right up to the window. And that's when Charles could see that his eyes were solid black circles. And that he said it reminded him of when he had seen a rabbit's eyes, and that there were just no iris or anything in the eye. It was just solid black. And he said it almost felt like it pierced his soul. And it made him feel very uncomfortable, almost nauseous. And at that moment, he knew something was off. So he rolled up his window and was going to proceed to leave when these kids started banging on the car, started pushing the car, started screaming. And this couple is sitting here terrified when thankfully another car comes down the road. Now, this car stops. It's an older gentleman, and he asks them, is everything okay? And at this time, these three young people that were there are no longer there anymore. And he says, well, my car was having trouble starting, but it started now, and I think I can make it into town. I think everything's all right. But there were these three young children out here in the middle of the night. It's cold out. I don't know what they were doing. They were kind of messing around with my car. Should we call someone? And the guy says, the older gentleman says, hold on. And he gets out of his car, grabs a flashlight, and they begin looking for these children. But you have to understand that in this area, it's nothing but cornfields, and they can see for miles around the vehicles. Yet they don't see these kids anywhere. And so the older gentleman says, I wonder if we could track down their footprints and see which direction they went. So they start looking around the car, and that's when they discover that there was only one set of footprints, which was Charles. And at that moment, he realized something was really off, and it freaked him out. And he made it back to town. And he said after that, he couldn't sleep because he was having these terrible nightmares in which he was seeing these three young kids, and he kept seeing those eyes. And he said those eyes were haunting his dreams, and he didn't want to go to bed because these nightmares were tormenting him of his experience. And that's when he spoke to someone who had referred him to me. And from what I gathered speaking with this couple is that they were very terrified. They didn't have any reason to make this story up. And they seemed like whatever happened, it disturbed them very badly. And you could see this in their face. You could see this in their eyes, that this troubled them. Now, I received many other reports just like this one in the same time frame. I had another report in which a young girl was getting off of work from a pizza parlor when she goes out to her car and once again is harassed by three young children asking for a ride, who got aggressive when she said she couldn't, and then they simply vanished. And with all these cases, they were 3 or 4 weeks old. They weren't recent reports. Until one night I received a report from someone that they had seen something very similar to this at a park in town, and this was basically happened that night. And so I knew the next day that I needed to go there. So I grabbed a friend and we headed out to this park. Now this park is on basically the outskirts of town. It is this huge rectangular open area surrounded by woods, and it's pretty secluded. You basically have to take some back roads to get there, and you get to the parking lot, and there's just this huge open rectangular area that goes on for a couple miles. So we get there and we pull into the parking lot, and we decided I will go down the wood line on one side and my friend would go down the wood line on the other side, and eventually we'd come around this rectangle and meet with one another and see if we could see anything and have a 360 view of the park. So we split up. I began walking this way. My friend starts walking that way. And I get down a ways to where my friend is no longer in sight, when I see what looks like the shape, the shadow of a figure standing by the woods, right on the wood line. And I shine my flashlight over there, and as I do this, whatever this is steps backwards into the woods. So I begin walking towards that area, and I get over to the wood line where the woods are, and I start looking around with the flashlight when I see two human figures standing through the woods by some bushes. And they look to be about 13, 14 years old, like two young teenagers. And I notice they are just standing there very still. And I could see their face. And as I went up with the flashlight, I could see that they had solid black eyes. I was almost in this state where I felt sort of terrified, but I also at the same time felt very intrigued, like I wanted to go towards them. And they started waving me with their hands and saying something, what I believe was, "Come here, come here, come here." And I think that is what they were trying to say to me. And I felt myself start walking towards them into the woods. And at that moment, my friend yells, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I look around, and there's my friend. And he comes running over to me. And I said, "I seen what looked like two figures in the woods right here." And he says, "I know exactly what you seen, because as I was coming towards you, I could see you looking in the woods. And I seen a set of two eyes that looked kind of like when you would see a deer in the woods. You could see sort of that glowing reflection of light off their eyes. And I could see it in the woods staring at you." And so we began to check out this area, and we couldn't find these figures, whatever they were. And we look over by the bushes. We were looking for footprints, just sort of anything that, like if they had disturbed any of the branches, they had broken any of the branches by walking through. We couldn't see any signs that there had been anybody even in this area, or that anybody had walked through this area. And it really bothered us that we couldn't find them, but we both sort of knew that they were there. And shortly after this, the reports simply stopped. And I didn't receive any more reports, and I haven't heard of anything since. It was just very strange that during this time, we had so many encounters with these entities that we couldn't describe. And what I believe to this day is that what people were seeing, what I had seen that night, was the black-eyed children.